All right, I think I've shown you weird legendaries, and I think I've shown you weird epics. I haven't shown you weird rares, which is what we're doing for this video. Now, you might think to yourself that rares are lame because they don't have a cool effect or whatever, but I promise you a lot of these cards are very stupid. Your job will be to tell me whether or not the card was played. You can say nerfed if you want to, or it was just straight up bad. A lot of these are really right down the middle. So I've intentionally picked cards that I think were very, very good, but I don't know if they would be considered. I'm saying banned, nerfed or not. That's
playing hard mode today. Okay.
Hard mode. You know how you said to me last video, you're like, you thought about this a lot. I thought about this a lot. So good luck.
It looks like it. We're pulling out the big guns today.
Let me actually grab the second part of this.
Giggling Inventor, 5 mana, 2/1 battle cry. Summon 2/1/2 mechs with taunt and divine shield. Do I get to see? Oh, Annoyatron. That's me. 2 mana, 1/2 taunt and divine shield, and it's a mech. This guy looks familiar. I don't know like if this was like when Mech Mage was a thing, but like for some reason this card looks familiar. It was okay.
Yeah. For some reason. The Hearthstone designers have like a huge affinity towards Annoyatron, and they will keep bringing this motherfucker back no matter how many years it's been.
Because he's annoying. That's the point.
They've even made hero skins on this card for the record. Like there is.
Have they really?
Yes, they have.
Wow.
Yes, they have.
People must love this guy.
Let me find that while you evaluate this card. I will really show you what it is.
So in terms of stats, it is 2/4 plus, so it's 4/5. It's technically a 5 mana 4/5 across 3 bodies, and 2 of them are taunt divine shield. That seems pretty good. I mean, just like taunt divine shield is not bad because it's like divine shield. It's like they don't take damage once, right? Okay, so it soaks 1 hit. It's and then it can maybe die, but then it has to soak another hit. Like just if you're really trying to like ward off aggro, that could be really good. But it's also like the stats are like not terrible. Is this like an old card or a new card?
This card came out during the Boomsday, which was 2018. Dude, Hearthstone.
I feel like I was
11 like 2 weeks ago. By the way, like
that's insane.
Like my mind it makes me feel so old. Okay, sorry. Continue.
We're so old. We're such boomers. You and I on our rocking chairs, just like reminiscing about the old day. Remember this card? That's literally all this is.
Like, I just gotta ask you a favor. If I'm still playing Hearthstone in 10 years, please come save me, please.
I mean, I think it's good just getting like 2 taunt guys. Just because, like, depending on, like, whatever it is you're trying to do, I feel like that could be very annoying as the card is intended. Sure, I'll say it's good. Why not?
Do you think it was nerfed?
Nerfed? Oh, yeah. Man. Did they nerf this? How would they nerf this? They could nerf this. Usually, this is weird. Usually, like, when we do, like, the nerf videos, because we don't do those all the time. When they do nerfs, it's usually, like, the mana cost,
yes.
I want to say.
Yeah, most of the time in Hearthstone, that is the easiest solution to a lot of the problems.
Right. It's usually like the mana, or it's like they might modify like 1 attack or 1 health, I'll say. And sometimes they change the effect, but I feel like that's like more seldom.
That is very rare.
Across this.
Yeah, very rare.
Yeah. Because I think they want to keep like the effects consistent, especially if people like leave and come back.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if they nerf this, it would go to 6. Would it be that? Is this that good, or are you just like completely baiting me right out of the gate? I'm gonna go with no.
Okay.
But like, I'm gonna go with no. And like, if I could, it's weird because it's like I could maybe see it, but I don't know. I don't think it's that good, but I think it's good.
So you think it was played, but it wasn't.
I think it was played. Yes, I think it was played.
Okay. And this is your final answer.
Yes.
Are you sure you want to start the video like this?
I am sure I want to start the video like this.
This card was fucking disgusting. Like it's
really,
it is not even in conversation how gross this card really was.
Wow. Okay.
So the reason why this card was so good is like the 5 mana 2/1 just summoning a bunch of dudes was like kind of whatever, but it actually meant that your opponent was delayed quite a bit. Which means if you're going against aggro, you are slowing the game down so much because how annoying this card is that it will allow you to bridge the late game. More importantly, during this year specifically, I have no idea if I've shown you this card yet. And I guess I haven't really shown you because, well, maybe I did. Hold on, I gotta pull it up.
Well, it depends if I remember too. That's the other half.
Have you seen this card? If you have not seen this card, we might do a whole video on Baku, but you could read that card.
I think you did show me this card.
Okay.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
This card says if your deck only has odd cost cards, upgrade your hero power. I'm not even going to go through like what the hero power is, but you may look at Annoyatron or Giggling Inventor, and notice that it is 5 mana. If you were playing an odd deck, as long as it wasn't super aggressive, this card is an auto include, not even a question. Like it was just that powerful. This card was so good, in fact, that people started hard running this card as a countermeasure to it.
Blood Knight. Is this like a classic card? This looks sort of familiar.
Card. This is a classic.
Yeah, I was about
card.
to say all minions lose Divine Shield, gain +3 press. Oh wow. Okay, so literally just like a silence, if you will, for like Divine Shield minions. That's crazy.
So it's very interesting. There's a card I probably showed you a while ago called Spreading Plague, which is for Druid. They just summon a 1/5 taunt minion for every minion that you control. It's the same kind of concept, but now it was neutral. Okay. Every class liked this card. It was disgusting. They nerfed it to 7 mana because they had
7.
Now,
Holy
at
shit.
7 mana, God, it's been so long. I don't remember if it was played still at 7. I think it still was.
Did they immediately go from 5 to 7, or did they go 5 to 6? Still too good, and then 6 to 7.
No, so that's actually a great question. I don't know the answer if they actually tried. They didn't. The in-game, I should say, they didn't go to 6. I think they specifically designed a lot of cards to be a part of odd or even that year because of Baku and Gen. So they wanted to keep that consistent. In Wild right now, it's 6 mana because like Baku and Gen have obviously fallen out of favor. There's just a ton of stuff that's happened. The other really important thing I have not mentioned about this card too is evolving. So if you play this card, you get the taunts and then you just evolve the Giggling Inventor into a 6 mana card. And you're getting like insane stats plus the Inoue-tron.
That's crazy.
It was just so good.
Spirit of the Raptor, 1 mana 0/3, stealth for 1 turn. After your hero attacks and kills a minion, draw a card. Okay, so I need to think about this. So you play this, you get stealth for a turn, so you're protected, and then you have to kill a minion, which the druid power is +1 attack, +1 armor, I think. And then if you kill something, you get to draw a card. But that stays, as long as Spirit of the Raptor just stays out, you can just do that. That's like, that's the stealth and the other part are like 2 independent things.
There is also a good density of cards that will buff your hero's attack. It's not just your hero power.
Stealth for druid is kind of weird. I don't know if that's like, I don't know. That just seems more like a rogue thing from what I've seen. So it's weird that it's like in druid. So I'm not sure if they like, that was like, there was a reason for that or not. Does druid have weapons? I feel like druid doesn't really have weapons. They don't really seem like a weapon archetype.
I would say that druids, like comparatively to warrior, no, they have had weapons. Druid just as a class from Warcraft does have a ton of ways of buffing their attack though.
Right,
so
right.
Like,
but it's only like for 1 turn, right? It's temporary. Or it's not always, not always.
So you are right. It would be for turn only, but depending on what you're playing, like you could activate it again. Or you could like let's say it's a minion, for example, that says like when you attack, you gain. When this attacks, you gain attack, right? So like it could go over multiple turns. Is what I'm saying. It's not the same instance as like a weapon where it's like you're guaranteed that attack.
You're essentially going neutral anytime you use. Well, it depends. If it's like a card that's like a one-time use to give you like a big surge of power, you're basically trading that card for a new card by paying 1 mana to play this. If it's something like what you're describing, where it's like, if that minion sticks and every time you attack, you just gain attack as long as like that thing's out, then that's like when you're actually starting to like plus an advantage. But it's so weird because like your game's so different relative, like, because like in Yu-Gi-Oh, that would be like kind of okay. At least like an older Yu-Gi-Oh. But it's so cheap though. The fact that it's like 1, I like the design of it. I'll say that. Maybe it saw like little play, but I'm going to go on, I'm going to say it was not good.
You go with bad.
I'm gonna go with bad. I'm gonna go with bad.
Let me just talk you through this for a second, just so you get the full picture here.
Sure.
It's like 6 mana. You play this. It has stealth for a turn. Your hero kills a minion. That means guaranteed, unless your opponent has some kind of AoE, this stays around for a turn, which means you're probably getting 2 draws for 1 card with Druid on this case, and you're dealing with the minion on board.
Yeah, but like that doesn't even sound that crazy by like Hearthstone standards. I feel like you could do way more for 6 mana. Like you could probably draw, you're playing fucking Druid. You could draw like 3 cards and not do any of that and probably still kill 2 things because you're playing Druid. So I'm going to go with, I'm not taking the bait. I'm not taking the bait.
You're right. No, you're so right. Yeah, this card was bad. You're right. The best case scenario often was your 1-to-1. The entire set that this came out with, I actually showed you, his name is Gonk, the legendary, which was after your hero kills a minion, you may attack again. That's what it was. So you wanted to use him plus Spirit of the Raptor plus a couple of buffs to just draw a bunch of cards. But yeah, we're not going to Disneyland today, unfortunately. So Spirit of the Raptor just never saw play. The bigger problem with Druid, of course, is like, why do I care when I could just ramp and then also just have different ways of drawing? Like, Druid is just so funny when it comes to a lot of these cards because it's like, yeah, it's really cute, but I mean, it's not ramping. So like, what am I doing with that?
If it was for like any other archetype, like maybe, but the fact that it's as soon as it's brown, I'm like, okay, this has to be the craziest card I've ever seen, or it's bad. Like Druid to me is like the Yu-Gi-Oh archetype of Hearthstone because everything just seems like so ridiculous comparatively.
You know what? The way you say it is honestly very true. It is very funny. I will say in this upcoming rotation, for maybe the first time ever, Druid has virtually no mana ramping. Like it is the lowest I think they've ever had in the entire game.
Isn't that the whole point of the deck? Like what?
Well, so this comes down to an inherent problem, right? Which is what is the consistency? What is the consistent problem with Druid over the years? It has ramp, other classes do not. So if you draw ramp, it's like you're not even playing the same game as Druid anymore. Is that a fun mechanic?
Sounds fun.
Is that something they keep wanting to push over 11 years?
Fun for me if I'm playing Druid, sure.
So yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see how well it ends up working out. This is actually completely unrelated to this video, but I'm going to show you this card just so you can see it. It's from the new set. I have no idea how good this is going to be. I want to hear your thoughts on this card.
Sure. Before I do that though, let me ask, like, that's like Druid's core gimmick is that it ramps, right? So what is there like, are they giving them a new gimmick? Because like, if it's just like nothing, what's the point?
So, okay. No, it's even funny you say that because their other gimmick is like choose one. And for this set in particular, every single class is getting a choose one card. So it's I don't know how Druid's really like. I'm sure Druid's still going to be playable. Don't let me discount them. They're still a very good class.
Sure.
But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year. And again, they do the core rotation, so they get to pick what cards are in the core set. They just didn't give them any ramp. I'm trying to think of what happened. Read this card. Let me know what you think of it.
Okay.
Also, I completely forgot to show you this. Here's the Annoyatron hero card, in case you're curious.
That is disgusting. Anyone who plays with that should just have their account deleted immediately. Tranquil treant. Can you like delete that from our Discord?
Sure,
I just don't even want to look at that thing.
I got you, sure.
Tranquil treant, 2 mana 2/2. This is a common in the rare video. I'm glad we're staying on theme. Death rattle. Both players gain an empty mana crystal. So it's ramp. So like you're saying this is like basically like some of the only ramp that they're gonna have, and it's like both people.
Well, so this is interesting, right? Because again, this wasn't supposed to be a part of this video just because you got on the ramp. Like
Sure.
This is the first time I think ever they've had like a neutral effect like this, where both players are
it's
getting
neutral.
a mana
That's
crystal.
right. I missed that.
Yeah. So any class can run this, which means now ramping is more ubiquitous across every single class. But more importantly, the design of this is like you don't want to kill this card for your opponent because they get the mana first.
Right.
Also,
they get
like,
first dibs. Yeah.
If you're going against this card and they're like an aggro deck, you have to kill it because then you're just taking damage every single turn. It's a weird balancing act. Do you think this card will be playable?
I kind of like the design of that because it's interesting. Because there are like some cards in Yu-Gi-Oh where it's like it might have like this like negative effect, but if you end the game, I'm talking more like older Yu-Gi-Oh. Like more like Yu-Gi-Oh 1 type stuff, where it's like it has this big negative downside, but if you end the game quick enough, like it doesn't matter, right?
Sure.
And so that's like sort of like how I see this card, where it's like if you're playing something like aggro, exactly, that was like where my mind went to immediately. It's like, okay, cool. Both of you are getting an empty mana crystal. They get first dibs, but if you kill them, it doesn't matter if you gave them the extra mana crystal, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if this card actually sees play. I think there's like some cool stuff you could do with it.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I think it actually will be really good. I'm excited to see what it is. Yeah. So far, other than this card, by the way, for Druid, there is 1 mana ramp card. That's it. You have 1 card. So we'll see.
1 card. That's it.
It's called New Heights. We'll see how good it ends up being, but it's not part of this video. All right. You may have. Actually, no, sorry. I skipped the card. Here you go. Here's your next one.
Helmet Hermit. That's hilarious. 1 mana 4/3 can't attack. Beast. I feel it's funny. I feel like these cards are in like all types of card games where it's just like cheap guy that's gigantic and then just like can't attack.
Yes.
This doesn't have taunt. Where like Yu-Gi-Oh, everything has taunt. So like we have things, but like it already has taunt baked in. So something like that in Yu-Gi-Oh is like arguably a little bit better. We have some cards, for instance, like what's something I could think of? Like Crazy Box. It's like this guy you can summon. This is like 3,000 attack. It literally does nothing. It's like awful. And it also can't attack. It has all these effects that you never want to activate, but it's basically just like a big guy that sometimes you would use in certain instances. But that was also in the extra deck instead of the main deck. This guy is similar to that. If you have, so there are decks in Yu-Gi-Oh that would like play dumb idiots like this that would have other cards that are like effect negation type cards, but they're like floodgates essentially. So I'm talking about if you're your editor wants to put it up, like skill drain. Skill drain is just a continuous trap that just says negate the effects of all monsters on the field. So now all of a sudden you can just play this 1 mana 4/3. Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything has charge, so you could just get in immediately with it. And now you we would call them like skill drain beatdown decks, where the whole premise is you're negating all of these like otherwise bad cards to be really good, and you're negating all your opponent's cards to be really bad. And those decks were like playable. They were never like top tier meta contenders or anything like that. And so if Hearthstone has the tools to like facilitate a deck like this, then something like this can actually be pretty good. It just really depends if you have the tools.
Okay.
So I would say, does Hearthstone have the tools is the question.
So I will say this. This is from 2022.
Oh, this is relatively new then.
This is relatively new. All the way back in Classic, there is a card called Ancient Watcher. It's a 2 mana 4/5 with can't attack. That card saw play in Handlock because there is other cards that can give it taunt.
Interesting. So, and this is, was that a Warlock specific card, or was that also a neutral?
Both of them are neutral. Like the card that gave it taunt and this Ancient Watcher was also neutral.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? Yeah. Like you can do things like you can silence this so that it can attack. You can give it taunt so that it's just like a big guy. Like there are things you can do with it. If you said that saw play, I think I'll be wrong. And if this like just saw no play comparatively, like I wouldn't be surprised. But like I think this card is good, but in like a very particular type of deck. This is not a card that every deck is running. This is not a card that every deck is running, but if the deck can facilitate it in like a way that it makes sense, kind of like what you're describing with the taunt thing, then this is like the perfect type of card for that deck. But I feel like that type of deck is like generally just not fantastic more often than not, at least by like Yu-Gi-Oh standards. So I would say like if I had to pick between good and bad, I would say it's more bad than good. I will say bad, but contextually can be good. Final answer.
So I'll go back to the Ancient Watcher example. That card was actually a huge menace back in Classic.
Really?
Zoo Warlock was a huge... Zoo Warlock, I think, objectively was the best deck in the game, which is like an aggro deck. So if you were Handlock and you had the 4/5 and the taunt, not only did it give you time to get to your bigger stuff, more importantly, it was enough to take down a ton of minions from your Zoo Warlock opponent. And because of that reason... Handlock was one of the best decks in Classic as well. Warlock was like king for a while because of also tap. Fast forward 10 years, well, almost 10 years, this card's unplayable.
Okay.
It was,
that makes sense.
I don't know how you feel about this in Yu-Gi-Oh. This is like completely side tangent, but it's interesting. I recently did a video. This is a complete side tangent, but it'll make sense going to like full circle here.
You and I doing side tangents, this would never happen.
I recently did a video, which is like the top 100 cards in Hearthstone of all time during their respective standard metagames or whatever they were, like whatever their standard metagame was. The number one card I picked was Undertaker, which I don't know if I've shown you. It was a 1 mana 1/2. Anytime you played a Death Rattle minion, it got +1/+1. So what would happen is you would play really cheap Death Rattle minions and you would scale out of control. At that time, and I think still to this day, other than Day 1 Demon Hunter, there was no deck that has been better than that one. Because if you play that on turn 1, if your opponent didn't have removal, the game was over.
Interesting.
That was like 10 years ago at this point. Which makes me think a lot of people playing Hearthstone were kind of shit. Not saying that like we're like again, first card game, whatever, right? People were still understanding what was good in Hearthstone. Like to give you even more context, like they had like when they brought Classic like back like 5 years ago. And they ran a tournament, and like a lot of the decks that were played in that tournament were different than the ones that they played back in Classic.
Or
slight variations. So it's like
Yu-Gi-Oh's the same. Yu-Gi-Oh's the same.
Going full circle, it's like, would Ancient Watcher still be playable till this day if we had all the knowledge we have now going back in Classic? Because people were like, the problem with your Undertaker pick is that people didn't understand the game as much as we do now. So is it truly the best card at that time if we had all the data we have now? It's a very interesting conversation.
It's hard to evaluate something like that too, because it's like in the context of, are you talking about like when the decks were in their prime versus right now, right? Because it's like those are two different power levels, so it's really hard to say. Although ironically, it's funny because even if, let's say I made that exact video, which I actually think I did make something like that like way long ago, like maybe like 7-8 years ago, I think in my mind, the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Back then would still be the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, in my opinion. That's
fair. That is completely fair. Well, which is why I put Undertaker as number 1, right? Because I was playing the game for 11 years. Other than Day 1 Demon Hunter, there's just never been a card like if I saw it on turn 1 and I didn't kill, I knew the game was over. So it's like, that's why. But anyways, complete side tangent here. I would love to see comments if like Helm and Hermit would be played over Ancient Watcher back in Classic. Here's your next card. You might have seen this card, but I'll be curious to hear your opinion.
Imp-losion. This looks familiar, but we'll see. 4 mana. This is a fell spell. That's fun to say. Deal 2 to 4 damage to a minion. Summon a 1/1 imp for each damage dealt. God, you guys in your... I cannot imagine in Yu-Gi-Oh! That there's like an effect that... Well, actually, I can, because we sort of have this. Or we did have this, I should say. I think I showed it to you. It's called Snipe Hunter. It's very funny. You target a card, roll a die, and as long as you don't roll a 1 or 6, you destroy it. And this is like basically in my mind like the same thing, because it's like maybe you'll kill. Well, granted, if it has 2 health, you'll always kill it. But maybe you'll... Let's say it has 3 health, right? There's a 66% chance you will kill it, and then there's a 33% chance you won't. And if you're me, you're always gonna miss. So great game. And then you just fucking leave the venue for the day. God, the variance on this card would be so frustrating to play. I would just, oh my God, I would get so mad. But it might just be good enough anyway, because like this is, you kill it and you get a thing. I feel like this is so high rolly. Like if you do, okay, wait, here's an important question I have to ask with this.
Sure.
Let's say there's a minion with 2 health. If Implosion does 4 damage, do you still get 4 imps, or do you only get 2 because it only has 2 health? So you kind of only did 2 damage, if that makes sense.
I am pretty confident you would get 4. I'm pretty confident.
That's insane. That's crazy.
I think when you deal damage, it's irrelevant of the current minion's health. So like, for instance, Frostbolt always does 3 damage regardless if they have like 2 or less.
Sure. I could see this card being so irritating to play against. Or, I mean, with, too. But I would say more against than anything. Because this is one of those cards where it's like, you play it and you're like, oh, I'm the best player ever. And then your opponent plays it and they high roll you and you're like, well, I'm done. Like, great. So yeah, so it is like Snipe Hunter, because like even if you low roll with this card, you're not happy with it, but you're still getting something. You're still dealing 2 and getting the 2 1/1s. Where like with Snipe Hunter, if you miss, you don't destroy the card, but you still discard it. And discarding in Yu-Gi-Oh is really good most of the time, and you don't care most of the time for the discard. So that actually like benefits you. So Snipe Hunter was good. Snipe Hunter was actually limited, which is fucking mind-blowing to me because it's like the worst card ever. So yeah, I mean, I think this card's good. Was it like widely played? Snipe Hunter was widely played. It was limited, so I guess yeah, I suppose. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Okay, this card's good. Yeah.
Do you think it was nerfed?
Nerfed. Oh my God. Well, the last time you asked me this, it was. Let me think about this. If I have to pay 5 for this, how much worse does this get? I feel like it gets a lot worse at 5. I feel like once you start getting into 5 or 6, you have to start paying a lot. 5, it might be okay.
Okay.
6, I feel like at 6, you can start doing better stuff. Snipe Hunter was limited. That's like the thing I keep going back to with Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yep.
Sure. You know what? Yeah, sure. Maybe they did nerf it.
Okay, let's go to Implosion here. You might have seen this card. This card came out with Mech Mage, that whole expansion.
Oh, it did. Okay, I was gonna say the art looks familiar. I just I don't remember this at all.
This is an older card. So let's. Implosion was an auto include in every Zoo Warlock deck, because like you kind of evaluated there, the low roll sucks, but it's still fine. The high roll here is insane. 4 mana to deal 4 damage to a minion and summon 4 1/1 imps is maybe the premium like cost for that effect. That is crazy.
Sure.
It was never nerfed, but in my mind, it should have been. I fucking hate this card. Now, I've gone on so many rants about this card, but I would love to hear your thoughts on casting a spell, but you have no idea how much damage it's going to do. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if I play Yogg, I know that Yogg every single time is going to cast random spells based on how many spells I've played. Sure. Implosion is a weird randomness because you literally don't know what it's going to do when you play it. It is a 2, 3, or 4. What do you think of that mechanic?
Well, because the weirdest part about my comparison to Snipe Hunter is that Snipe Hunter is still a minion, and Snipe Hunter is actually decently statted. Like it's 1500 attack, so like I don't know what that would be in Hearthstone, like a 3/3 or something, like a 4/3 maybe. So like even if you miss with Snipe Hunter, you could still like attack with Snipe Hunter, and he had like a decent stat line that it wasn't like the worst thing you could be doing. Where this is just a spell, so it's like a one-time use. Not to mention Snipe Hunter, as long as you have cards to discard, you can keep firing if you miss, which is also a big difference. Yeah, they always talk about like with card designs, like input randomness versus output randomness, right? And it's like, it always... it's always like that feels bad thing where it's like, oh, my opponent's going to like deal the 4 and I'm only going to deal the 2. And it's just like such a frustrating card. But at the same time, there's like this exciting anticipation of like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like like anything's possible. And like you can sort of control the randomness, right? Like if you have a hero power that can like do a damage or something else that maybe can like, okay, you only dealt 2 with implosion, but maybe you attack with like a 1/1 and like kill off something else, right? Maybe a 1/1 you had to turn prior. So like you can kind of control for variance to a degree. But like, I feel like this is a card where when you're at the highest echelon of competitive play, it's extremely frustrating because the counterplay is really difficult because you don't know the outcome of how this card is going to like produce. But like at lower levels of play, it's like a good card that's also like fun for people who are like not super hardcore because they're like, you know, someone's going to high roll with implosion and they're going to like remember that won them the game. Yeah. Right. Fair. And that's that moment that they can like tell to their friends that like, oh yeah, like, you know, this is like a cool thing. Snipe Hunter's similar. Is that good? That's a different, like that, like for the game, that's I think a completely different argument. But I think in terms of like a card telling a story and being memorable, I think this card is good at that.
There is a card that you're going to remember, absolutely, which is this fucker.
Oh, God. I remember this card. Yeah.
So
that's Knife Juggler. I'm putting it together. Yep.
Yeah. Knife Juggler interacts with minions that you summon, right? So all of a sudden, if you kill a minion, not only are you dealing 4, you're summoning 4 1/1 imps, you are doing 4 damage randomly, which like amplifies the randomness and how feel bad it can be. Knife Juggler was obviously like just really good on its own in a vacuum. That's why I'm going to show you. It's just disgusting. But yeah, Implosion was great. Was never nerfed. They stopped designing cards like this after the Grand Tournament. I don't think there's a single other card that doesn't have like. Wait, is this input or output? I think this is output, right? For randomness.
This is output. Yeah, because the randomness is happening after the decision was made to play the card. Yeah.
So they don't ever do this. I can't think of a single card where they have ever done this ever again because I think
it's for the best.
It's definitely for the best. There is a card called Lightning Storm from Classic, which is the same concept except for Shaman, which was an AoE, which said deal 2 to 3 damage. And let me tell you, there are so many games decided whether or not that hit 3 or 2.
That's crazy.
So now Lightning Storm just does a flat 3, which is for the best. But yeah, they have stopped doing that card. Okay, enough of my hatred towards Implosion. What do you think of this one?
Hagatha?
Hagatha.
Okay, I never would have pronounced that correctly. Scheme. 5 mana shaman spell. Deal a damage to all minions. Upgrades each turn. Okay, how does this work?
Well, this is in your hand at the end of your turn. Okay. It upgrades by 1 damage.
Okay, so let's say I have this on turn 1. I have my mana. Let's say I don't do anything, right? So at the end of this turn, it goes to deal 2 damage. So on, so on. Okay. That's kind of cool. Scaling board wipe. Also very bad because like if you draw this way later, this card is awful.
It's also interesting because this has nothing to do with the evaluation, but it's a card that you don't really want to keep because it's 5 mana. But now you want to keep it because of the fact that like you want it to scale. It's very interesting.
Well, you know, Rarran, you guys have a well-designed game that has a mulligan compared to Yu-Gi-Oh, where we don't have that. So, you know, you have the luxury of throwing cards back if you like. We're stuck with what we have in our opener. So you spoiled little children playing your Hearthstone. You say that,
dude, but I think in your game, it's probably for the best you don't have a mulligan after what you
You are correct. You are 100% correct. It's for the best we do not have a mulligan. Actually, that's a whole discussion in and of itself. We'll save that for another day. Anyway, I do kind of like this just like from a design standpoint where it's like, if you see it early, it's just like insane as the game goes on. But if you see it late, it's just like really bad. And you wish you probably just played like a general board wipe that was probably just a better rate anyway. Because I can't imagine you draw this on like turn 9 or 10 and you're like, well, this is the worst card in my deck. Thanks. But I could see this being good if like there's a super aggressive metagame and you have this in your opener, or you like aggressively aggressively mulligan to have this because like this is maybe like one of the only cards that can like AoE the opponent for like a really high rate. I like the design of it. I feel like it's one of those cards where it's like in a very specific metagame, like people might play this. I feel like the variance is like too high on it. And I feel like you'd rather just play things that are like more consistent. So I would say similar to similar to like the helmet hermit. I think it's like situationally this card like could be useful, but I feel like otherwise it's like too high variance that it's too much for my taste. So I'll say bad.
Okay, this one's weird because I think you really hit it on the head. If you drew this in the early game, it might be the best card in your deck.
Yeah,
like,
straight up.
Might be.
Straight up.
It is so good to have this on turn 1 to have that guaranteed clear to basically kill everything on the board. Because if you're running Hagatha's scheme, you're not playing like minions. Like you are a slow deck. You're trying to get to late game. You're trying to go for the value engine. There's another card that's like a hero called Hagatha that would give you a ton of value. So that's what you're basically playing for at that point. It just bridges you to the late game. If you did top deck this like later in the game, it just feels like it does nothing. And 5 mana deal 1 to everything is fucking maybe the worst thing I've ever heard in like Hearthstone. So this one's weird because people did play it. I don't remember it being like a meta definer. It's usually like the 30th card you put into your deck. That's like probably what it does.
Sure.
I didn't put this one in specifically because I wanted to get like a clickbait, like here, look at this idiot. This one's cool because this one is a lot of thought about deck building, whether or not you think this is worth it to be consistent. And I think that's like a really well done design. Huge fan of the card. Huge fan of the card. I really liked it. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a card. We talk about this all the time. It's like when a card makes you think, I think that they've done a good job. Ticking Abomination. This sounds like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. 4 mana, 5/6. Oh, let's go. I'm in. Death Rattle, deal 5 damage to your minions. It's Death Rattle. I was about to say, does it count itself? He'd be dead, so that would be a no. Again, this is like similar to the crab, where you're playing like this like overstated guy that has this like big drawback, but if you just like mitigate the drawback, then like who cares? We're at 4 mana now instead of like 1, which is a big difference. I guess it's like if like in what you're talking about, like if you could like taunt this guy up, that could be important. Maybe like you have other death rattles that you don't mind triggering if this thing blows stuff up, like that could be a thing. Maybe you just like play this guy down. Like maybe you have a thing that like taunts it. And then like if they kill it, like whatever. Cause like maybe he's like the only guy out because the other guy's weak. Like there could be some like cool combos you could do with it potentially. But is it enough? I think my biggest hesitation is that it costs 4. He's just like kind of expensive, but like maybe that's still fine. Again, if you have like a deck that there's like, you don't mind things dying, like maybe you're playing, like I'm thinking if you're playing like a super aggressive deck and like it's a bunch of death rattle guys and you're getting in, you're doing damage. And like, obviously ticking Abomination is like the target. And if they kill this, like maybe it board wipes you. But if all those guys have like upside, if they die, then like you don't care. And it's just like a reset on tempo versus like advantage, which is a lot more important in your game than it is with Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm going to go with my cop-out answer of bad, but in the right deck is good. Okay. But bad most of the, like bad in like 90% of decks, like 8% of decks. Okay, so I'll be more specific.
To be fair, that is probably the exact answer that you want to give for a card like this.
Oh, good.
You might be asking yourself, why would I show you this? Right? Like what's the point? Like it's objectively speaking, you're not running this in like any deck. Like you need a reason to run this.
There's a reason. Yeah. What's the reason?
And of course there is a reason because I would have showed you this. Priest in the expansion, the Boomsday Project. Okay. Got 2 cards that were absolutely necessary for this to pop off. There's this one.
Mechathune. I know about other Cthulhu like in passing, but I don't think I've seen Mechathune.
All right, go
I
ahead.
don't think I've seen. Card. If you have, I forgot, but I do not remember this version of it in any way.
Okay.
10 mana, 10/10 Death Rattle. If you have no cards in your deck, hand, and battlefield, destroy the enemy. That's sick. Cool okay. Card. That's cool neat. Card. Reckless Experimenter, 5 mana, 4/6, Death Rattle minions Death Rattle minions. I thought it was like Death Rattle. That's the effect. Death Rattle minions you play cost 3 less, but die at the end of the turn. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So,
all of a sudden, because of this Ticking Abomination, you could actually kill someone with Mechathune and so you would go, I think you needed 1 more mana. I can't remember. It's been so many years. Again, it's been too long. You go Reckless Experimenter. You'd play double Ticking Abomination. You'd play Mechathune with no cards in your hand and no cards in your deck. You'd end the turn, which meant that the Ticking Abomination would kill the Experimenter. And the last thing it would kill with the second one would be the Mechathune because it was first in, first out, right? Sure. That means the Death Rattle of Mechathune would proc, which would end your opponent's life. That is the combo that was pretty consistent in Priest because of Ticking Abomination. That is the whole reason this card was played. Now,
that's cool. Was it good?
It was definitely, it was playable. Like, absolutely. Okay. You saw it in the metagame. Okay. I don't remember if it was tier 1. I don't think it was, but it was a super
more like a
fun
rogue
deck
pick.
to play. The thing about Mechathune was Druid really liked it, so I think it got really overshadowed by It got really overshadowed by Druid.
I love cards like that though, like especially because Yu-Gi-Oh is an eternal format. Like that happens all the time, where like the most random bulk from like 2004 will all of a sudden be like in a tier 1 deck because it's just like the right stat line, the right like whatever. It happens all the time, and you know, Yu-Gi-Oh is one of the only games that is an eternal format, so it's cool.
It's also
I was gonna say, seeing Mechathune gives me an idea for a video you and I can do maybe next time.
Okay,
so we'll see.
How to kill your enemy hero without hitting them?
Maybe we'll see. We'll see.
What I was gonna say, it's also an interesting thought process because did they design Mechathune and Reckless Experimenter thinking that people would come up with this combo? Because it's like literally the perfect puzzle pieces to make this happen.
Sure.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Sure.
Okay. Here's your next
The
card.
world may never know.
Well, I don't think we'll never know because I think most of the designers don't remember.
That unfortunately is probably the case. Pogo, what the is this? I thought Yu-Gi-Oh had weird stuff. Pogo-hopper. This is 1 mana, 1/1 mech beast. It's 2 types. Interesting. This is a rogue card. Battle cry, gain +2/+2 for each other Pogo-hopper you played this game. Okay, so this is weird. So you can only play 2 of a card, but your game has a bunch of like weird duplicating type effects because like Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really have that. So are there a critical mass of cards that you would duplicate this? Because this thing's super cheap. This is interesting because it sort of goes back to the question. We were talking about this actually off camera before we started about like, would you play a super cheap guy that has like 15 stats? Right? Or like in Yu-Gi-Oh, would you play a normal summonable monster that has like 8, or a normal monster that has no effect, but it has like 8,000 attack, right? Because that's sort of like what this thing becomes. Granted, you're summoning like multiple of these, so like each one's gradually getting bigger and bigger, especially if you're like duplicating it and like the battle cry keeps triggering. But how good is super cheap thing that's just like stats and nothing else? I would say historically that's not very good, at least by like Yu-Gi-Oh standards. But there's like, it's Rogue. Rogue has like the combo mechanic, right? So like that's like a thing that like, it's because it's so cheap, like maybe there's something there with that.
So I will say, for instance, Rogue has Shadow Step, big deal. Like bounce it back to your hand, replay it.
Oh, and like replay it. Okay.
Yeah. Sure. There are cards that shuffle more copies of this into your deck. There's a ton of ways of drawing in Rogue. That's the other big thing for Rogue. If you have enough draw and enough of these Pogo-hoppers, is raw stats enough to win you a game?
I don't know. That seems like you're coping, to be honest. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that's bad. And if this is like the best, if Pogo-hopper Turbo was like the best deck for a while, I'm going to be shocked. So let's hear it.
Pogo-hopper Turbo. Pogo-hopper was fine. Like, it was fine. You're right. Like the problem with Pogo-hopper was like, we had this discussion off recording, is just, are raw stats like good enough to actually win you a game? If you had the dream opener, by the way, you would crush people with this. Like, it'd be unstoppable. Because if you get a 1 mana 8, like 1 mana, I said 8/8, but like 1 mana like 7/7 very early on, that's like a substantial power that your opponent's not coming back from. Like, you were running through this. The problem is like sometimes you just didn't draw correctly. What happens if you don't get your Pogo-hopper? Your whole deck falls apart, right? So Pogo-hopper was often like, fine. I'm trying to remember for the best of me if it was ever like a tier 1 deck, but I don't believe it ever was. It was often just on the verge of being super meme as other strategies came out. Really fun. Like, people love this one though.
Conjured Mirage. What the hell is this? 4 mana, 3/10. Taunt. I'm in. At the start of your turn, oh, never mind. Well, I mean, this is a cool card, actually. Wait, hold up. Let me think about this. 4 mana, you play this thing. You're basically not dying, and then it goes away. Very flavorful. I like that. This is a neat card.
Cool card.
So I remember, what is it? Because I played Mage, obviously. Like, I remember Ice Block. Is that the thing that makes you immune?
Yes.
Yes. So this is sort of similar to that in a way, right? Because like Ice Block, you're immune. This, you're not immune, but like with Hearthstone being as creature centric as it is, as long as your opponent can't just like face damage like with a spell or like a creature effect or whatever, then basically it's kind of the same card, right? But this is actually neutral, so like any deck could play it. So it's like giving half Ice Block to any archetype.
I would say I would compare it more to Frost Nova, which was just like you freeze the enemy board is how I would say it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think that's a better. I forgot that was a card, to be honest. So thank you. That's a better comparison. Against like the aggressive decks, this is kind of cool because it's like a 1-turn reprieve. Like if they go like Giga aggro and it's like you see like if you calculate that they might be able to like kill you next turn, you could drop this and sort of like turn skip. And maybe if it's like turn 5 or 6, maybe you can like do something else with it, maybe. Then it like buys you a turn, and maybe that extra turn, whether you need like, let's say, you know, it's mage, right? Let's say you need that 7th mana for that flame strike, or that for the other board wipe you showed me, the shaman one. This like sort of does that in a way. I think that's kind of like how I'm likening this to. I want this card to be good just because I think it's cool. I just think like the flavor of this card
It is
rocks.
very well designed. Huge
Yeah.
fan.
I'm gonna say it's good just because I like it, to be honest with you. I want this card to be good.
So you're going with the card was playable.
I'm going the card was playable. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately it was awful. It's
that sucks.
So
what a cool card.
It was a cool card. I think the problem with it though is just if your opponent didn't trade into it, you played 4 mana to do nothing, and yeah, I guess you just kind of didn't take the damage, but that's probably not good enough in your average game of Hearthstone because they still have the minion on board. And it's not as great as Frost Nova, because Frost Nova is cheaper, and often with Frost Nova, like you could make sure that your opponent, regardless of if they had minions on board or not, like you freeze them. So Conjured Mirage, the problem with it is like you would use removal on this, and then your minions can still attack. So unless like you have the perfect situation for this card to be taunting, and your opponent doesn't want to trade in, which doesn't happen often, that any form of removal, you're not actually blocking the damage. Frost Nova guarantees you're not taking the damage from any minions. Also, I'm going to go back to Pogo-hopper real fast here because I feel like I missed kind of something important. When this card was released, that was 2 mana. So when they buffed this card, it ended up being actual playable. 2 mana was fucking atrocious.
2 mana, this card would be horrible.
Yeah,
that'd be
I should mention that. I completely forgot about that. Okay.
Crafters or it's a paladin card. I'm screwed. 7 mana. This is a holy spell, it seems. At the end of your turn, summon a random. Oh, great. Back to the random. Summon a random 6-cost minion, lasts 3 turns. So is this just like a lingering effect that it's like you play it and then the game just generates a 6-cost minion at random at the end of each turn?
Yeah. So when you play any aura, basically like kind of like a secret on your hero's portrait, it'll be like a little lightning bolt, I think it looks like. And then at the end of turn, you'll see it proc, it'll go down, and then you can hover over it at any point in time to see how many turns it has left.
Can you interact with auras? Like, are there a way to like can you like destroy auras or no? Really interesting.
There are cards in Paladin, and with this set, I can grab it if you want me to. It's I think it's a 4 mana 4/4 that increases the amount of turns for your auras. I think that's the only card that interacts.
7 mana so you're getting 18 mana worth of value over the course of 3 turns, but it's random 6 costs. Okay, so is it just the 6 cost pool like of any given like legal? It's obviously not like any 6 costs in the game ever, right? It's just like whatever's legal at the time.
As long as it's standard legal, it doesn't matter what class it is.
Okay, so it could be like you could take something from like a rogue class.
Yes.
Just hypothetically. Yep. Okay. These effects are always so interesting because I feel like we've done a bunch of these, and some of these are like the most broken cards ever, and some of them are awful. So it's like I don't really have a good gauge on this one, just like at first glance.
That's Paladin in a nutshell, by the way.
That's why I never get them right, unfortunately.
Yep.
I've already just accepted I'm getting it wrong.
It's funny because like over Hearthstone's history, Paladin's always been like pretty like whatever, but I don't know. Recently, they've been top dog. Like they always feel like they're so fucking good. It's kind of annoying. In the new set, they look like they're gonna be miserable to play against. So
fun, great. Is this part of the reason for that?
No. That's nothing. Independent of this.
Okay, just asking. Paladin seems very like aggro to mid rangey. I think there like might be like control elements, but it's definitely, they don't like seem as controlly as like priest or mage or like some other things. They can probably go that. I'm trying to think, it's like, are you really going to get the full value out of this? And is there like a deck that plays like later, like more late game stuff that you get like the full value out of a card like this? And maybe there is, but it's just like, that doesn't really seem like the Paladin vibe from my understanding of this game, for whatever that's worth.
Okay. I will say that Paladin has basically done everything over Hearthstone's history. It's a pretty.
It seems like it. It just seems like it's like the Swiss Army knife of classes. Yeah. It just like does everything, which is like it's like a jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing.
Yes, I would agree with that.
It's like all the cards seem like they just seem like very efficient. Everything just seems so efficient with the deck, and this is one of those things where it's like the effect isn't super flashy, but it's like some of those cards are the most deceptive because it's like, oh, like it's not like in game winning, and it's not like Mechathune, right? But it's like, oh, this card's like really, really good. And so it's like, you know, you just play it because it's super efficient. That's kind of like the Paladin vibe that I always get. The trick with this is I need to figure out my answer and pick the opposite because I'm always wrong with Paladin. When was this printed? Like how old or new is this?
2024.
Oh, literally last year?
Literally last year.
That actually helps skew my decision.
Okay.
You have led me down the path to believe that Hearthstone and the power of the game has accelerated quite a bit in terms of its pacing. Based on that, I think this card might be too slow. And even though you can maybe like high roll or like, you know, get like average, even if you get average returns for this, if going based off of what I've learned that Hearthstone is just a lot faster now, Yu-Gi-Oh has this problem too, where you'll see this really cool card that they print and you wish they printed it like 5 years ago because it would have been like nuts if it was printed 5 years ago. But now it's like too slow. I'm going to put this card in that camp and I will happily be wrong. So I will say that this is bad and sees like very little play. Like maybe there's like a control paladin that like this is the top end or like part of the top end. But I would say like generally speaking, this card like basically sees no play.
You would be 100% correct.
Oh my God. So, I got a paladin card right, ladies and gentlemen. Woo! We did it.
But here's the thing, like, it's actually mind-blowing because you're so right. If this was printed 5 years ago, it'd be a fucking menace. It'd be so miserable to play against. It's just so crazy to me that like this card's not playable because even with it, the golem card you can run 2 of, which increases the amount of turns that this is active, so you can technically get it to 5, which means you're getting so much mana and tempo over the course of 5 turns. The problem is Paladin, and I gave you actually the biggest hint last video, but you probably don't remember.
Probably
remember
not.
Remember that weapon that like buffs your whole hand, and it also.
Oh, like, was it the paintbrush thing?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Why am I running crafters or if I can just buff my minions up to kill my opponent? Like, what is the fucking point of this? So it's so funny because they're both released from the exact same set, but there's no reason to run the aura cards because what Paladin's currently doing.
How the hell do you pronounce it? You say Yu-Gi-Oh names are Khartut. Sounds Egyptian. Khartut Defender. 6 mana, 3/4. Taunt Reborn. Reborn is it comes back with 1 health.
Yes.
If I recall. Okay.
Yep.
Death Rattle, restore 3 health to your hero. 6 mana, 3/4. Protects you. It comes back, so it's annoying. And then on top of it, when it dies, it heals you. I'm assuming the Death Rattle triggers again if it's reborn.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. That's like a lot of words on a card. And that's like a lot of things that like one card does. This guy's kind of cool. This card's cool. I feel like this is I feel like Priest would really like this card. This just feels like a Priest card to me. I don't know if it's because of like the reborn thing or the healing, but it feels like a Priest card that they made a neutral for some reason. 6 mana is kind of a lot, but it does have like a lot of just keywords on it.
This is the set they introduced reborn in, so they have to.
Oh, is it? Okay,
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if the undead typing matters. It could. That's so hard to evaluate.
The undead is just, you can ignore it because it wasn't actually in the game when this card was released.
Oh, they added that later.
Yeah, retroactively. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. So let me think about this like stat wise. So when it comes back, it's a 3/1. So it's 6 mana, 6/5 across 2 bodies that are both taunts, but the second taunt is worse than the first, but it's still a taunt on a 3 attack minion. So there's a world that it could like kind of take something else out, but it could also just be like pinged down. So like, who cares? Restoring the health. It's so weird because like in your game, restoring health actually matters. Where like Yu-Gi-Oh, like you could literally have like infinite life and it doesn't matter most of the time. 6, like I feel like there's just so many other cool things you can do for 6. But this guy I think this is like more the example of this is just like really efficient in a lot of ways. But I'm seeing some downsides. I feel like the reborn thing is like okay, but the fact it only has 1 health means I feel like it just dies to everything. So like I guess that forces your opponent to use something to kill it, I guess, whether it's like 2 mana for a hero power or like, let's just say like it basically makes them waste 2 mana most of the time. I think that's like one of the biggest downsides. So it's like this card almost it might look better than it actually is. And all the Hearthstone people are probably like, this card sucks anyway. So that doesn't mean anything. I think I'm talking myself out of it. I think I like it, but I think it's just like, when was this released?
2019.
So like middle of Hearthstone, mid Hearthstone, maybe this is actually good enough. If this got released last year, no shot.
The same set as the Mirage card you saw earlier.
Oh, well, that went well. I'll say because it was 2019, I'll say it was playable.
Playable.
I'll say it was playable.
You think it was nerfed?
Nerfed. I hate when you do this.
I didn't think
How would they nerf? So
was it banned?
That's true. That's fair. I do the same thing. So, okay, if they nerf it, how am I going off nerfs? It was 5 mana, and they made it... If this was 5 mana, this thing would be insane. I would have a completely different perspective if this was 5, I feel like.
Okay.
I'm going to go with no.
Okay, I'm just fucking around. It wasn't nerfed at all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You said playable. I think that's an understatement. Very good card. Very, very good card.
Okay, so it's just very efficient.
I think because, so you're right, like you would have to spend maybe 2 mana or whatever that happens to be, right? But in this is my favorite expansion of all time for the record. This was very board-centric. So having Khartut Defender take 2 hits from minions, restore 6 life, is a very big deal to have in the neutral pool. It was very good in Highlander decks. It was very good in slow decks. Priest loved this card, like you mentioned. There's a card called Mass Resurrection, which would summon 3 copies and resurrect 3 minions that died. This is one of the prime targets to get.
That would be nuts.
So
that
much
would be
life
nuts.
to get back.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very good card.
Devolve. This does not look familiar. This artwork's hilarious though. 2 mana. Transform. Does a nature spell matter?
In the context of when this was released, no.
Okay, so this is somewhat old. Transform all enemies minions into random ones that cost 1 less. This is hilarious. There's because this is a shaman card, right?
Yep.
So they have what is it? Hex. That's a thing.
Yep.
Okay. So I remember that, and Hex is already good. This card is cool because if you're, it's also only enemy minions, which is very important. Because if it was like all, I feel like that would definitely, we'd be having a way different conversation here. I think this is cool because like if something has taunt, then like you just devolve it, and then now it may, I mean, it could still have taunt, but like maybe statistically it won't. I think you're hoping that you're interacting with them in a way that is like removing. It's funny, in our video we actually like talked about something similar to this. I don't want to like give it away, but like sort of like bypassing like mechanics in like a unique way, right? I think that's what this does.
Yep.
Because it doesn't target either. So if something has like I don't know what your targeting protection keyword is. This plays around that, right? That's really cool. And it's cheap. This is only 2 mana. I'm just thinking about this. It gets rid of Divine Shield. It gets rid of Death Rattle. Like getting rid of Death Rattle is huge. Like that's always something in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like if you can bypass stuff triggering in the graveyard, like that's massive a lot of the time. I'm just trying to think of like any keyword you would like happily want to get rid of. If there's like a huge like just fucker and you just can't get like, you just need it to be like squishier, we call it in Yu-Gi-Oh! Then this card's great. I think this card rocks. I hope this is good. If this card sucks, I'm gonna be really sad. This card seems good.
Final answer.
Don't say it like that. Why did you say it like that? That was very suspicious the way you asked me that.
No, sorry. Final answer?
Yes.
This card is amazing.
Okay, thank God. This card's so cool. This card's sick.
This card is shot. Okay, so to give you like kind of more context here, in the same set, there's a card called Evolve, which is transform all friendly minions into random ones that cost 1 more, which was also a very good card at the time because you could build a pretty good evolved shaman. For some reason though, devolving always felt better. And I think it's just because your opponent plays a big minion that maybe their deck is built around, gone. If they have a big board and it's all taunt, like look at Khartut Defender, gone. Like I don't have to deal with that card anymore. They want to do any resurrect nonsense, gone. Very, very powerful effect. And the fact that it was 2 mana AoE is fucking absurd.
That's insane. That's
very,
insane.
very good card.
Did they nerf this? I feel like they would have to nerf. Really? I feel like this is an argument to make this like cost 3 versus 2 seems so cheap for this type of effect.
I think it's because of the, like, we talked about how you want to get rid of a top minion, all of a sudden they have another top minion, right? Like there is the variance there to kind of make it a little bit more in check. I'm not gonna call it like broken must play card. It was definitely playable. It was very good. And like even in wild now, which again is like your Yu-Gi-Oh format, it is still played because that's how good this card ends up being.
That's crazy. Honestly, I could see that too. Like this card seems amazing.
I'm trying to remember. You've mentioned Hex. Hex was nerfed to 4 mana at some point. I'm just trying to double check when that was, and I think this card got.
What was it before? 3?
It was 3. Yeah. So Hex got nerfed to 4 in Frozen Throne, which is 2 expansions after this. So Devolve ended up being a little bit better because of that reason as well. Very good card.
Interesting.
Very
interesting. Cool. Sick card. This is like, I wish Yu-Gi-Oh could do something like this. Like obviously it's hard because it's not digital, but like this is weird because we talk about randomness, right? But I don't know. I feel like this is randomness done right in a lot of ways. I would agree. I think so. Randomness is probably the hardest thing to design in a game like this because you want to make. I think it's like you want to make it feel fair to both players,
But the thing is, like, I would rather err on the side of like a card's consistently good with some variance rather than it is randomly good or bad. And I think Devolve does the former, which is why it's good design.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want it to be binary. Like the fact that there's like that gray area, I think is really good for this.
Yeah, it's like I think that's what makes Rag like such a good design card as well, or such a well-designed card, is just because of the fact that like it's usually always good. It just depends on where it's hitting, and you can kind of mitigate that problem with it. Where Devolve is the same feeling. Very, very well-designed card. Like I think it's one of the best ones they've ever done. I agree.